Hey everybody, this is Christian, and today I want to show you my top 5 Kubernetes management tools that I'm using in my home lab. These tools are absolutely amazing, and if you're working with Kubernetes, they can help you to deploy new applications in your clusters or monitor and edit your current workloads, troubleshoot log files, and plenty of other things. So if you're looking for the right tools to manage your Kubernetes installations, I'm sure you will find something interesting here. We will cover 2 terminal tools, 2 web-based tools, and there's also one desktop tool that I really fell in love with, because in my opinion there isn't this one and only tool that is just perfect for everything. There are many useful and different tools out there, and they all have their pros and cons. So let's talk about some of the individual strengths and weaknesses of these tools and programs. I will tell you where I believe they really stand out and how I'm using them in my home lab, so you can then find out for yourself which ones are great for you. By the way, all these tools are free or have at least a free plan for personal home use. Some might have additional subscriptions if you want to enhance the features, but I'm all about the free versions and mainly comparing and focusing on them, so they are still very useful in the free community version, so you don't actually need to pay for a license unless you need some really more advanced and business features that you might want to use in a company. So you can just download and deploy them on your Kubernetes cluster or on your PC. I've just put your links to all of them in the description of this video. And before we jump right into these different tools, I want to say a few words about today's sponsor, Tree, another great free and open source tool to prevent Kubernetes misconfiguration. So before you do anything in Kubernetes, always validate your manifests in Tree. It's really amazing. It also natively integrates in your Kubernetes clusters and all kubectl commands via the new webhook feature. That is really nice. So we might also take a closer look at this new feature in an upcoming video. So if you want to check it out, you will find a link to that tree in the description of this video. So just go and check it out and try it out. It's really a great tool. Okay, so let's start with Kubernetes management tools. And the first tool that I want to mention here, you probably all know it, but I still believe it's worth mentioning. This is Kubectl. So Kubectl is probably the most simple tool to work with Kubernetes. It's a very basic terminal tool that you can use to query, create or edit resources, get events, or troubleshoot containers and logs. And honestly, it's one of my favorite tools out there. So you will often see some video tutorials about Kubernetes where I'm using Kubectl just to edit resources or deploy something new. Maybe it has something to do with my deep love for terminal tools, or because I just like simple and minimalistic solutions. But because it's a terminal tool with no real user interface, you need to do everything by typing in commands and arguments. So it lacks a bit of usability there, and it takes some time to get used to it until you remember all these different commands. But the simple design and the fact that it's a command line tool is also sometimes an advantage, because maybe you just want to quickly do something on Kubernetes and don't want to hop into any complicated tool. Or what you can also do in a CLI tool, if you want to query something and you want to pipe the output to a different program like a grep command, if you want to filter or search for something. This is also a great advantage of tools like Kubectl. So keep that in mind. Even though some of the tools I'm covering in this video are far more advanced, I still like to use Kubectl for many tasks, and it is undoubtedly useful. However, of course, you will agree that there are many things that you just can't do with it. So things like centralized access control or authentication via different service providers. This is where you might want to search for a more advanced tool, and I believe this is where web-based tools really are superior. For example, let's come to one tool that I actually never covered here on this channel before. It is Rancher, and I honestly don't know why I didn't cover it yet. Maybe I'll do that in the future, because Rancher is a really great tool for Kubernetes. I like the web interface of it a lot because it gives you a great overview of your environments. You can unite all your Kubernetes clusters in the cloud. They support many popular cloud providers like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, DigitalOcean or Linode, but also local clusters in your home lab you can very easily connect via Rancher or their agent. And you can get a very detailed view of all your clusters' health, like the load of your nodes, the CPU, memory and disk utilization, but also the individual workloads. They have some great visibility of what is currently running and going on. at your cluster. Just like you would expect that from a Kubernetes management tool, you can also use it to deploy new applications or create and edit resources, namespaces, and so many more things. You can also organize and group several namespaces into different projects. So that is a very Rancher-specific organization feature, and that's actually very useful if you're working on large environments and you just want to filter some resources. And of course, you can also inspect individual workloads and pods, open a shell inside them, get events and logs, or also use Kubectl directly from your browser. So that is extremely useful if you quickly want to do administrative tasks, but you don't have access to your kubeconfig file on a local PC, maybe because you're working on a different machine or whatever. And one thing that I really like about Rancher is it integrates well with Helm charts, so you can use it to deploy any kind of application, either through a chart or through guided menus. It's also nice that you can manage existing Helm deployments as well. So you have a web editor to edit your custom values and manage Helm chart upgrades directly through Rancher. That's something that not every Kubernetes tool provides, and it's a very big plus. You can edit all existing resource types as well. For example, when you want to deploy something like a cert manager, which brings its own type of resources, for example, certificates or issuers, you can just edit and create these resources directly in Rancher and create manifests with this integrated web editor that also starts with a template, even for these custom resource types. That's very, very nice. So if you are using Rancher, you barely need any other tool for Kubernetes, yeah? It's really a mature all-in-one package, and it also integrates well into the whole ecosystem of Rancher like Longhorn or Harvester. I can't cover it all here in a short video, yeah, but maybe I'll do separate videos about some of these special features if you would be interested. And by the way, if you enjoy watching these videos and they are helping you, then make sure you give this one a thumbs up as well and subscribe to my channel, because that would be cool. It really helps with the algorithm, so you're doing me a big favor. Okay, so one thing I have to say about Rancher, although it has all these incredible features, or maybe because it has them, it feels like a pretty complex and heavy tool. It also runs plenty of background services and workloads across different cryptic namespaces under the hood of your cluster, which makes it, in my opinion, a bit more resource hungry than other tools, and it definitely takes some time to get used to it. If you're new to Kubernetes, this just kills you with all the different settings and features it has. So especially in a small home lab, Rancher feels like a bit of an overkill to me, and more geared towards the professional field of Kubernetes, like in cloud environments or bigger SRE or DevOps teams. But maybe that is exactly what you are looking for. So I wouldn't say this is necessarily a bad thing, that it's more complicated than other tools. It all depends on your use case. Hence, I strongly recommend checking it out. Yeah, I still like to use Rancher even in my small home lab, mostly when I need it for something that the other tools can't do. And where some other tools might be a bit limited in feature set, you can be sure Rancher has something in that area. But just in case Rancher feels a bit too heavy or too complex for you, yeah, I totally can understand that, there is another tool that I want to show you. It's Portainer, which you might already know from Docker. And that's also a pretty nice web tool to manage your Kubernetes clusters on-premise or in the cloud. And just like Rancher, it supports many different deployments on public cloud providers or also local clusters you can manage. At a first glance, it looks very similar to Rancher. In Portainer, you can also deploy applications. Yeah, you can use it to create resources, edit resources, create namespaces, applications, volumes, config maps, and you also get a nice web kubectl terminal. But in my opinion, this is a much simpler tool, and this simplicity comes at a price. Because you can clearly say Portainer has its strengths in the Docker area. Yeah? For managing Docker servers, I couldn't think of a better tool than Portainer. But for Kubernetes, I think they need to step up their game a little. My pain point with Portainer is that you can't edit all Kubernetes resources with it. For example, if you want to work with ingress controllers like traffic, you can't create ingress objects directly. You need to enable the ingress feature in the namespace first, which only supports Nginx and traffic in some experimental way. And then the configuration is kind of weird. Really, I know what Portainer aims to do. Yeah, it tries to be simple and straightforward, certainly. And if that's your thing, well, Portainer might be just perfect. But I personally would be happier if they would just have another menu point to create other types of resources. For example, if you are using something like Cert Manager, which uses their own type of resources to obtain SSL certificate or issues, we already have covered that in Rancher, you can't see these objects somewhere in the web UI. And that's a bit annoying, because if you need to customize these specific objects, you always have to switch to another tool like Kubectl to do that. However, there's one feature that Portainer has which is extremely compelling, and this can also be a workaround to create resources with manifests that you can't see directly in Portainer, and this is a GitOps feature. If you want to do GitOps in Kubernetes, Portainer makes it very easy to get your Git projects deployed. You don't need anything else, you don't need to deploy Argo or Flux, you can just connect your Git repositories and let Portainer deploy them automatically. And I also like to still use Portainer a lot in my Kubernetes home lab, because what makes Portainer stand out from the rest of the Kubernetes management tools is that it can do both. It can do Kubernetes and Docker. And they also recently added support for HashiCorp's Nomad, so that shows that Portainer focuses more on the broader support for container orchestration. So if you have any kind of a mixture setup with Kubernetes, Docker, or maybe Nomad, you can use one tool to manage them all. For example, I'm using it in my home lab to manage all my Kubernetes clusters and Docker servers as well through one centralized web-based tool, and this is just wonderful. So it might lack a few capabilities when it comes to Kubernetes, but you can still use it to deploy applications, edit basic resource types, inspect events, or troubleshoot log files quickly. So with Portainer you get a great Kubernetes management tool that is a lot simpler and easy to use than Rancher, just maybe not so flexible. Anyway, both of the two are great choices, but in case you don't like web-based tools so much, there's another application that I want to show you, and this is called K9s. Just like Kubectl, it runs entirely in your terminal window and it doesn't have any graphical interface, but it is much more powerful than you might think now. Because unlike Kubectl, this feels more like a real management tool. The main view displays information about different kind of objects and resources in your cluster. For example, you can see I now have my nodes currently selected, and I can see all the details like CPU, memory, version, and how many pods are running. With the arrow keys, I can just move up and down the list, and I can also use hotkeys for commands like D for describe. With that, I can see more details about the selected object, and with escape, I just come back to the main screen. You can also look up the help and get all the different commands and hotkeys that are possible. The whole navigation is pretty similar to something like a text editor, something like Vim, because there's also a command mode that starts with a column, and this can show you any resource types in your Kubernetes cluster. You just need to type in what you want to see, and if you want to search for this list, because if you're looking for something specific, you can also enter a filter with a slash command, and then you can just type in any name and it will show you only the items that contain this. So if you're working a lot in the terminal, that should be very familiar to you, and you can really do most important management tasks with K9s. You can inspect any logs from containers or attach a shell. You can see all the different resource types in Kubernetes. It also works with Helm. You can see all your current deployed Helm charts with revision number. It can also show you the configured values. Unfortunately, I haven't really found a way to upgrade the charts directly in K9s, but it's impressive what you can all do with this tool. But there is a downside, which is a pretty big one for me. You can inspect, edit and delete resources, but you can't create new ones, which might or not might be a big deal for you guys, depending on which other tools you're using to create your resources. If you're creating resources outside your management tool, if you're using something like Argo CD or Flux, it probably doesn't matter that you can't create new resources in K9s. But for me, it is a bit unfortunate, because all the other tools that I'm mentioning here, they support the creation of resources. Some even have their own GitOps or Helm implementations like Portainer has, or they offer a pretty sophisticated menu with templates and default values for all kinds of resources like Rancher does. Again, this is why it is so hard to compare all these different tools fairly, because they have entirely different approaches. And K9s won't be a tool for everybody, I know that. Maybe because you want want to create resources with the Kubernetes management tool, or you aim to deploy Helm charts easily, or some people just don't like remembering all the hotkeys, yeah, they would like to click on something. But if you are a terminal guy, and maybe you are looking for a familiar tool that you want to use for inspecting and troubleshooting, maybe quickly edit some existing resources, then K9S might be just the perfect tool for you, because it is faster than any other tool, yeah. If you have mastered the hotkeys, you can really speed up your workflow with a terminal-based tool like K9S. And what is also pretty nice for terminal people, you can edit resources directly in your favorite text editor like Vim or Emacs. And nevertheless, I also have to say, it is a cool management tool, yeah, but it isn't my first choice. I've put it in this list because I just love terminal tools and it's sometimes fun to work with it. But for most things I do in Kubernetes where visualizing stuff is really helpful, I still prefer a desktop or a web-based application with a real graphical interface. Anyway, some of you guys might find it just useful and interesting, so just check it out and give K9S a chance. Okay, so we are almost at the end. Yeah, we have covered 2 great web-based tools, we have 2 great terminal tools, but what if you're not happy with any of them? Finally, I want to show you one tool that I've recently discovered, and this is a desktop tool that you can use on macOS, Windows or Linux. It's called Lens, and it simply connects to your Kubernetes clusters via the kubeconfig files on your local machine, similar to kubectl or K9S. And just like in the other tools, in Lens you can do all the important stuff that we already covered here in this video, like getting details about workloads, pods, deployments, inspect and edit all resources. Yeah, also custom resources can be edited similar like in Rancher or K9S. You have a terminal session that you can use for kubectl or attach a shell into running containers. You can inspect log files and events, and it also has a great Helm integration. That's competitive to Ranchers, by the way, so where you can just deploy new charts, inspect installed releases with version numbers and your custom values. You can even upgrade them, a thing that wasn't possible in most of the other tools. And you can also create new resources, of course. It also has many useful templates for creating them. That is what I really like. However, these templates, they don't exist for all custom resources, so just for the most common ones. So here Rancher has still an advantage over Lens, but at least you can create them, yeah? And you have the most useful templates available. What I think really stands out in Lens is the interface, yeah? It just looks clean and very straightforward. And the fact that it's a desktop application and not a web application makes it really fast and snappy, especially when you're navigating through the menus. Sure, sometimes the application needs to reload information from the cluster in the background, but it's much faster and more responsive than a web-based application, and it's easier to use than a terminal application. In terms of features, I believe this probably fits right into the gap between the almighty Rancher and some simpler tools like Portainer and K9S, because it has many useful features the other ones don't have. It allows you to create and edit all resource types, unlike in Portainer or K9S, but at the same time it doesn't feel as heavy as Rancher, and it also doesn't require any additional resources on your Kubernetes cluster because it's running entirely on your desktop PC. So that's why I believe Lens is just the perfect tool for you when you're managing a Kubernetes cluster or maybe multiple ones and you don't want to deploy an agent or a service to it. Maybe on a Raspberry Pi where you obviously have some memory or performance limitations, so that's the perfect spot for Lens in my opinion. Honestly, when I really think about it, it's currently my most favorite tool that I'm using because it has all the important features that I need, it is fast, and it's easy to use. The only thing where I believe Lens has a few disadvantages is in the corporate world. Yeah, I know it has a pro version and it has some collaboration features, but I haven't really seen a feature to integrate it easily into an Active Directory, for instance, or I don't know how they're handling cloud provider support like for AWS. So that is all existing in Rancher and Portainer, for example. So that's why I believe Lens might need to improve. But apart from that, for a personal home lab, I think this could be just the perfect Kubernetes companion. So these were, in my opinion, the most valuable Kubernetes management tools out there, at least the ones that I've used so far. And I believe every tool on that list here has a very specific skill where it stands out. As I said, for me, there is not this one and only tool that is perfect for everybody, but I hope you now got a better sense for which one might be great for your workflow, and I could show you the one or another interesting tool that you didn't know before. And now it's your turn, so why not just tell me your personal favorite, put it in the comments below, because it would be very interesting for me to know which ones you like and which tools you want to see more tutorials about. And as always, many thanks everybody for watching. A special thanks goes out to my Patreon sponsors, you guys are just amazing. And as always, I will catch you in the next video. Take care everybody, bye bye.